Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. When I started UX3 in 2021, I had a very simple idea. So being a mentor myself, I ran into a lot of junior designers and people who were changing their careers, and they all seemed very stuck in their career. And at first I didn't understand why, because clearly, like, they did finish their course, they had a knowledge about UX, but they were missing a few things. And just after speaking to a few of them, I realized that they were missing guidance, they were missing confidence, and they were missing someone that they can ask real questions to. And that's when I thought to myself, when I mentored in UK, I reached out to the organizer and I was like, I have ideas how I can improve this program. And he was like, yeah, sure, like, that's great ideas. And then I never heard back from him, and I was like, why wouldn't I do that? Like, why wouldn't I solve that problem myself? And that's how UX3 was born. So these are our pictures from our last two rounds. Round 7 and round 8 closing in December and in May. And we started as a pilot in September 21, and it became a program, and now I like to call it a movement. But basically, yeah, don't be impressed by the numbers, because we don't really work on quantity, we work on quality. So what I can say, in these 3.5 years, we successfully supported just over 100 designers. We help them by matching them with a mentor, but not just, randomly matching them with a mentor, but that match was clearly based on mentees' skills that they want to improve, that mentor had, and also based on their shared background. But more than anything, I realized that we created such a big and cool community where designers can grow. These are some of the stats that we're actually proud of. So based on our stats from first 6 rounds, sorry, I'm just been very busy, so I didn't do the stats for 7th and 8th round yet. But 71% of our grads landed a job in UX during or after graduating. 92 is our average net promoter score, rated both by mentors and mentees, and 54% of our mentors got promoted in their role. But I don't want to tell you these things, and it's just coming from me. So I took a few feedback that we've got on Google. So some of you guys are here in the audience. Thank you so much for leaving the feedback. Thanks, Martina. Thanks, Rebecca. So basically, these words are a reason why we're keeping, and what keeps us going for the past 3 years. And today, mentorship matters more than anything. It matters more than learning Figma or learning frameworks. It's about learning how to be a designer. And now you're thinking probably, like, what does it actually mean to be a designer? It means to learn how to communicate properly, because when you start working in design, you probably know all of you who are working already, that you will be communicating with a lot of different people from different areas, and these are the skills that are, like, very valued today. You're going to work with a lot of different people. You're going to be managing stakeholders. It's going to be messy. You're going to be dealing with a lot of deadlines. You're going to be getting feedback from people who don't necessarily know anything about design and don't know the value of design. And you're going to be doubting in yourself a lot, which is great. That's all a part of the process. But then also, like, the most important thing is how to stay human in this tech-driven world. To also make this a little bit more complicated, everything is changing around us. So we have AI that is becoming an essential part. Can you actually see this? It's AI. It's become an essential part of our design process, and it's had, like, completely changed the way that we do work today. We have inclusive design or accessibility that is not a nice to have anymore. It's core to ethical and effective design. And then in the middle of that, all of that change, we believe what keeps designers grounded is community. And these are the 3 topics that we'll be speaking about today: AI, community, mentorship, and inclusion. None of this would be possible without people who believe in designers, and also designers themselves. So I would like to use this opportunity. Where's Zoe? She's gone again. But say thanks, Zoe, one more time, and to Morgan McKinley for opening their doors for us and for treating us with beer and pizza. Thanks to Design SkillNet for keeping the education accessible across Ireland. And thanks everyone for coming in today, and to all of our mentors and mentees. Speaking of mentors and mentors, we have 3 ex-mentors. Well, actually all 4 of them mentored at some point in UX3. So Anna was a mentor in first round, Pranj second and third, Hannah 8, and Ash maybe 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to leave it to Ash now, and then you can present the guys and briefly, yeah, while I give the microphone to Pranjal. Thank you so much, guys.
I can attest to that, what Val has said about UX3. As a mentor, when I started there as well, I learned so much as a mentor, and I'm looking forward to hearing your talk about mentorship. Okay, so first to kick off then is Praj, and he's going to be talking about inclusive design and how AI supports that and also impacts that.
My name is Pranj. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a product designer. I have a past life in engineering background, so I used to be a developer front end, and then I started getting into design. India is my home, but like I moved to Ireland almost 8 years now, so Ireland is home now. And I've been designing for past, 6.5 or 7 years, pretty much. Here's a little bit about me. I do love a nice pint of Guinness. Grogan's is where I'm often found. I passed my driving test last year, and I know I wouldn't shut up talking about it because I think it's an achievement. I do like to sketch and draw. I like a bit of interior design. I love food, but I'm miserable at cooking. But I'm lucky that my partner loves to cook, so that's their pasta that they made. And if you're wondering, that's not my child. I just took that picture at London Pride. I just found it moving. So yeah, inclusive design. What inclusive design is? Basically, inclusive design is a form of design or process that considers the full range of human diversity with respect to people's capabilities, abilities. It's quite broad actually, like culture, race, gender, other forms of human differences. Like, we are humans, we are very similar in a lot of aspects, but then when we go into nitty-gritty of things, we're actually quite diverse. I don't like to use the word different, but I'd like to call it diverse. And it's a way to create products that understand and enable people of all sort of backgrounds and abilities to participate in society on equal levels. Why am I talking about this? In order to understand inclusivity and inclusive design, we should first realize what exclusion is, how it happens, why it happens, and then acknowledge it. Exclusion usually happens when we try to solve problems using our own stereotypes and biases, right? That's the way we do it, the way our brains work is it creates these sort of shortcuts in our heads. We use our own abilities, stereotypes, and biases as the starting point. And then we end up with conclusions and solutions, which end up in products and websites and stuff, which knowingly and unknowingly, we end up creating for a very specific niche set of people. And it could be based on gender, age, tech literacy, physical abilities, yada, yada, yada. But in broader terms, basically, biases happen predominantly because of these factors. So age, gender, culture and language, physical abilities, money, tech literacy, and all that. Unconscious bias is basically having all these sort of stereotypes and how these stereotypes influence our minds while we are processing our day-to-day activities or information. And that's just how our brains work, human brain. Our brains look for these sort of patterns and shortcuts to inform decisions without having to involve the conscious part of our brain. And it's very natural because brains, we like to think we are smart. And the reason why it happens is because we want to reduce the cognitive load on our brains, right? So we create all these shortcuts in our head based off everyday experiences. But the previous experiences that our perception is being kind of sort of filtered through can actually include a lot of stereotypes. For example, I can tell you some of my personal ones. Like when I moved to this country, when I started working and stuff, like people that I worked with, they were like, "Oh, you have good English." So they thought that I would not have good English or whatever, but they were surprised with it, which I understand, right? Or I don't know, my friends actually thought that because I'm from India, I know how to cook like chicken tikka masala or anything. I honestly know. Like I'm into those quick 10-minute recipes, but like I'll be an hour into it and they won't look anywhere close to the recipe. But that's just, yeah, so these are like really small examples, but like that's how we function in day-to-day life, right? This is a very, like the way I see inclusion and stereotypes and biases, unconscious and conscious biases, is like we have our own confirmed beliefs, we have facts, right? And then what we see day to day and experience and register things. It's the amalgamation and intersection of that. That's how we create all these stereotypes. And they influence our actions and like how we behave, how we make judgments and stuff like that. Why am I talking about this today is because as designers, creators, innovators, engineers, I think it's like every decision we make can raise or lower the barriers to participation in society, especially when it comes to like digital products, solutions, website. It's kind of like our collective responsibility to lower these barriers through like more inclusive services, accessible products, environments, and also experiences. Like design for inclusivity not only opens products and experiences to like more wider range of people, but it also reflects like who we are, how as humans we're evolving. Like the way we were pre-COVID and the way we are now, especially when it comes to our work, it's like so different, right? We're growing, we're changing, we're adapting, and everything is changing around us. Like especially with AI now, like things are changing rapidly, right? So we want our solutions and designs to reflect that sort of change as well. So it keeps up with that and make sure that we don't forget about these folks that are not on that these products are on the same level for them as well when it comes to ease of access. It's crucial at this point in time to understand that both, not to just understand, like you realize your biases and combat those biases, but for also to, why it's important is because we want to create and tap into those biases when it comes to our customers as well, because when they're coming to you and asking for solutions, they have their own biases and stereotypes. You need to understand and realize your biases and stereotypes first, get yourself out of that, and then tap into their world and then make them realize that, okay, this is what you want, but I can actually provide you a better experience, which would be for a much wider audience. So in a nutshell, it's basically seeing the human diversity around us as a source and inspiration for better solutions and better designs. There's often quite a confusion around like inclusive design and accessibility. Accessibility is basically a subset of inclusive design. Inclusive design enables us to draw on the full range of human diversity, and accessibility is the degree to which your product or your solution is inclusive of and usable by the broadest range of individuals. The way I see it is like accessibility is an attribute and inclusive design is a method. There's also terms around like universal design, accessibility, inclusive design. If you look at it, universal design is basically like it's a noun. If you take it, accessibility is more sort of like an adjective, and then inclusive design is a verb. Universal design is basically a design that works for everyone in all scenarios. Accessibility, as I said, is an attribute, and inclusive design is basically a human-centered process that excels on human diversity and take inspiration from that. According to WHO in 2024, 1.3 billion people in the world have some sort of significant disability or impairment. That's 16% of world population. And that's a potential audience that we should be catering to while we are designing solutions and like solving problems. A bit of history about impairment and disability. In 1980s, the definition for disability was taken as a personal attribute. Like it was in context of health experience. Disability is any restriction or lack of ability resulting in form of any sort of impairment to perform an activity in the manner or within the range of considered what was considered back then the normal for a human being, right? But that has changed now. It's not just a health problem. It's actually a much complex phenomenon. Disability is a context-dependent phenomenon. It's complex, as I said. It's a reflection. It's basically how a person's body or a human can interact with stuff around them, and it's dependent on not just like how they live, but also situations around them. Here's a good example of a product that really improves accessibility, right? This is a wheelchair, right? This is a traditional manual wheelchair where folks who can't walk or have some sort of walk-in mobility impairment, it offers them mobility, right? But the user is always sitting in the wheelchair, which kind of reduces their functional height. This not only reduces their ability to use the functional space around them, but also lacks the user's efficiency around like home, work, offices, and social situations. It does have secondary medical implications as well, because they're sitting all the time, they're not able to stand, and problems keep cropping up. Like there are assistive devices that are available only to solve the mobility changes, but when it comes to the functional, therapeutic, and psychological factors, like this does not cater. So here's a good example of inclusive design, right? I'll play the video in a second, but is it playing? Oh yeah. So as you can see, the user can actually stand with this wheelchair and utilize the functional space around them to the max, right? It has a lot of medical benefits because they're able to stand, there'll be better blood circulation, there'll be respiratory and urinal implications of sitting all the time, but this actually solves that as well. And also when it comes to like engaging in social environments, let's say they're in a pub or out in a party or a gathering, rather than just sitting on the wheelchair, this actually gives them, enables them basically to actually stand eye to eye and have all those conversations. So there is therapeutic and psychological benefits to have more inclusive of a design rather than just making it accessible. 1 second. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, so I don't know why it's being cut at the top. Is it the screen? Okay. What I'm trying to say is impairments and disabilities are not always permanent, right? It's kind of complex. They could be temporary, permanent, and situational, right? For example, if you've ever worked in a bar, right, and if customers are there asking for drinks, you might find it hard to like what they're talking about, what they want, because there'll be music around, there'll be people shouting, dancing, ordering, and all sort of jazz. So you might find it difficult to hear them. That's an apt example of situational hearing impairment. If you play games, if you're going for like rugby and stuff and you broke your hand, that's a temporary impairment because it's there for a while. It is an impairment, but it's not going to be permanent. And obviously, we all know about the permanent disabilities and stuff. So how are we going to improve this? The way I see it is on the left, I talked about accessibility as an attribute, inclusive design as a process and method. But in real life, as a designer, I think we need to bridge the gap, as you can see there. So when it comes to inclusive design, we need to work with our PM counterparts to make them realize like this is actually going to help not just us, not just business, but also it's going to have more ethical impacts because we're going to level the ground for everyone to have that ease of access to our products. When it comes to development, accessibility is hardly dependent on developers, but you have to work with them, right? These are some of the things that we've been working on. Like we do that in where I work, and I'm sure you guys are pretty much aware of that. So I'll go through these quick, right? So when you're designing your solutions and website, focus is something that's very helpful as a visual indicator for anyone who relies on keyboard to use your services or your website or your products, right? It's a visual change, so every time they go through one button to the other, it tells them where they are because obviously they can't use the mouse for based off like cognitive disabilities or people who are relying on screen readers. Touch targets largely for people with motor delays, people who have some sort of impairment where they would have like, unlimited amount, not unlimited, but like random spurious inputs. And the recommended size for any touch element or call to action in your UI or your screen, it's recommended to be between 7 mm to 10 mm. So it really helps with people, for people who have motor delays and stuff. Next thing is keyboard. Keyboard is actually key when it comes to making your products accessible. People, especially who have visual impairments, people who are blind, people who can't see, they interact with their websites and solutions using screen reader software with keyboard. Since they can't see, they cannot have that point and click interaction with your website and services. So keyboard really helps. What you have to do as a designer is you need to give an order of the priority to your devs. For example, if that's a dialogue, every time they use a keyboard, the first tab goes to these two buttons because they're the most important thing. Then the second is a call to action, a positive call to action, then cancel, and then dismiss. So you let them know, and they code it in a way. So when the product launches, if someone is using keyboard to interact with your website, this will tell them with the help of screen readers, right? Screen readers, as I said, they convert digital text into synthesized speech. They really are a great tool for folks who rely on accessibility tools to use your products and solutions. They empower actually user to hear the content with the help of navigating using the keyboard. Where your role is going to be as a designer is you need to give them the sheet, as we call it, the log sheet, where what is the name of the label, what is the role, it's a control type, state selected, and hint helper text. This helper text is actually very important because when the user is using screen reader, every time, let's say they land on to the component one, the screen reader will tell them what exactly it is. So whatever you're going to write it, that's going to dictate to the user who cannot see, and they'll make their judgment based on that. Color contrast is must have so that folks who have some sort of like color blindness, they can figure out what's happening on the screen, especially with text on the background and vice versa. It also includes like icons on the buttons as well. We use colors a lot in our designs, obviously, and it used to convey like information on diagrams, maps, and other type of images. So when someone is dealing with color blindness, it's really hard for them to figure out what's going on. Also, for folks who are working in difficult lighting conditions. There's actually quite a lot of tools. When I started, there weren't many tools, but if you go into Figma, there's so many plugins to like check color contrast and stuff, and it'll tell you straight up. And when it comes to AI now, it's super quick. We had to do this back in the day manually. High contrast is people with low contrast sensitivity, people with color blindness, and people working in different lighting conditions. I actually realized about the high contrast when I was working with Dublin Fire Department. It was a project within like Microsoft where I work, and they were actually using Teams, and they were using map of Wicklow Mountains. Because they were high up in the chopper trying to like mitigate the fire, sometimes the sunlight would be so strong they weren't able to see it. So that's when we realized that actually we need to change the outlook of like the UI of Teams to high contrast for them, and especially at night as well, because they'll be wearing, I don't know, goggles or whatever, that they need to see things in high contrast. Now, we're in a really different era at the moment. Like it's actually quite fascinating how AI is changing stuff, and obviously it's going to have its impact on accessibility and inclusive design. Internet is, we all know, it's a treasure trove of information, but the thing is like not everyone has that sort of ease of access to this treasure trove, right? AI can now read, write, recognize, talk, create, and now register as well. So where you left off, AI can, when you come back, AI can actually pick it up from there. And this is where I think AI can step in like a superhero. It's actually being a game changer now, because where I'm working on stuff, it actually really helps us to like improve designs and make it more accessible, be it digital products, websites, and stuff like that, and ensuring that everyone can have not just access, but the same level of access and ease to your products, regardless of their physical abilities and impairments. Imagine like this is, we all know who this is, right? in my head, this is the grandfather of AI when it started, right? Imagine a world where like pictures and words, they all come alive, describe everything for those who cannot see or have some sort of physical impairment. Up until now, to make things accessible, there was a lot of cost involved because you have to dedicate resources, engineering, time, testing and all. But with AI, it's actually super quick and easy because the algorithm can actually detect that for you and do it for you. Furthermore, with the image recognition technologies can now not just describe images, but videos and live scenes as well. So that really helps with folks who have some sort of impaired vision. Speaking of live transcription and stuff, the algorithms are actually so solid that it can not only transcribe it for you, it can also detect the tone, like if the words are, I don't know, if the birds are chirping or if the person is talking in a sad tone or they're high pitch and stuff like that. So it actually not just give them just the, the way I say it, like it's not just the lyrics now, it gives them music as well for someone who cannot see. So they know exactly what's happening. Makes them a bit more involved. Some of the examples that are really happening around us is Giphy. I think we all know, like we all use memes and GIFs and stuff. They actually partnered with a digital accessibility provider to create all text captions for their 10,000 most used GIFs. So we all know like GIFs and memes, that's an internet, like it's an internet video and meme-based language that we all use in WhatsApp and stuff. For people who can't see, they're missing out. So I know it sounds very small, but it's a huge step when it comes to accessibility for folks who can't see, so they can be more involved. And what this is going to do is like the AI can actually describe them, what the sense is, what the GIF is about, what the joke is, and it can learn from that as well. Another big example is Netflix. I think it was last year, Netflix actually rolled out custom captions with high contrast backgrounds that would stand out for people who have some sort of color blindness, a visual impairment, and stuff like that. It's not only for the captions actually. I've tried and tested. The live transcription now actually can detect the tone as well. So if the movie's in a different language and there's a joke, it tries to match that tone with the translation as well. So from English to, let's say, Spanish or English to Hindi, it'll try to match up jokes based off the data that's been fed to it. So it's really changing, and it's happening around us in all these products, and that's why I'm talking about it today, that we should also, it should reflect in our, what we work for, what we're designing for, because things are changing. This is the last thing, I promise. This is something I'm quite passionate about. I started learning about gender inclusive design, I think 3 years ago. I'm very curious about it, and I think it's very important. I'm still learning as I go, but I'm going to share some of the examples where I came across certain things and I experienced things. I was actually booking a hotel in LA in 2022, and this is where I came across when I was putting in the details. And if you go into prefix, they actually give you so many options, but there's a general neutral honorific for those who do not wish to be identified by gender. So it gives them a sense that they don't have to restrict them to those boxes because they don't feel like it, that they are in those boxes. It's more not just accepting, it's more inclusive rather. This is an application for Canadian passport renewal, and this is huge because it's on a government level, and Canada is a huge government body, right? When you see when they ask for a person to mention their sex, it says male, female, and another gender. It's just a small extra radio button or whatever it is, but it makes the whole system so inclusive for someone who does not identify themselves between the binary terms. This was actually back in my Tinder days when I was single, and like when I just figured it out. It's like, oh wow, this is different, and I wasn't aware about it back then. So when you go and create your profile, it says I am a man, woman, more, and when you click on more, it gives you all the possible genders that you can like. It gives you an opportunity to pick the gender that you yourself identify with the most, or don't show your gender if that works for you. Again, this is happening all around us in small little bits, but things are changing, which is good. Again, this is my own personal Instagram. I was replying to my friend's story, and I realized whenever you reply, it says you reply to their story. So they're not assuming your gender. It doesn't say he or she. They obviously know, but they're not assuming that you confine to those pronouns, which is very inclusive, in my opinion, and a great way for a product like Instagram. This is all fashion. So as you can see, Uniqlo, Zara, they're all coming up with like ungendered clothing, like those pants with like pleated plants. I bought them from Uniqlo, and they're in the women's section, male section. They're the same. So that's how things are changing. They're not restricting themselves to just like, this is the male section, this is the female section. You wear whatever you want. And for brands like this, it actually sends a really important message. We also have a responsibility to educate ourselves. We need to educate our brands as well if you're working with, by leading the way. We need to educate our clients as well that this is how the world is changing. And we need to have those open and honest discussions and conversations with them. We need to educate our users too by setting an example. And I think these two brands are doing great in that sector. Last few things. I try to practice to use more gender neutral roles and terms. Like instead of saying mankind, humankind, I always use partner instead of boyfriend or girlfriend. Businessman, representative, policeman, police officer, chairman and chair, congressman. It's all man. So like the way I do is I try to practice is like be more gender neutral. So we respect, the whole spectrum in that sense. This is like my gym, FlyFit, cheap and the best. But what I saw is like their bathrooms are actually inclusive. And imagine like how many chains they have. They're like around 40, 70 something gyms around Dublin and Ireland, I suppose. And they have inclusive toilets. And it's not just related to like man, woman, or gender. It's like folks who cannot walk as well. This is a great move for FlyFit as a gym to give that sort of space to their customers. Last thing. So I talked a lot. Basically, what I'm trying to say today is recognize exclusion first in order to be more inclusive in your products and for yourself as well. And once you recognize it, you'll see diversity around you. Learn from that diversity. It'll give you inspiration. It'll give you a lot of fuel and food and to change your thought processes and change your biases or break those stereotypes. And once you have it, solve for one and then extend to many. By creating all these digital environments that embrace, clear inclusivity, understanding and acceptance, you're not only empowering like people with some sort of impairment, disabilities, or our LGBTQ friends, you help all users. When you ensure the inclusion for one, you actually make space for all. You transform your environment, digital spaces, experiences into a place where everyone can belong, everyone is accounted for, and where everyone also feels included as well. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.
We're going to go on to our second speaker now, who is Anna Prince. She also works for Microsoft, and she's going to talk us through the aesthetic of AI and how new patterns are emerging.
Cool, great. Thanks, everyone. So how do you trust something that you can't see? This is ChatGPT's voice. OpenAI partnered with Studio Dunbar in Rotterdam on this concept. They call it the emotive point. And I think it's a really stunning piece of motion design. So an AI voice assistant has to walk this line between being kind of a trusted peer, your best buddy, but also an all-seeing God. So this emotive point, I think it walks that line. Like it pulses, it's soothing, it's organic. And it's coded so that the patterns will respond to your voice as you're speaking to it. And at the same time, like it's got this human element, but it also kind of looks like a crystal ball. It looks like the earth, it looks like the ocean. And if you said that this glowing orb held all of humanity's knowledge, I'd be like, yeah, that tracks. So hello, everyone. My name is Anna. I've been a product designer for 15 years. I've worked at Accenture and Etsy, and I'm at Microsoft currently. So I work on Copilot Studio, which is a low-code tool to use to build AI agents that work for you. So that question that I asked about 30 seconds ago, how do you trust something that you can't see? That's one that I think about every day. What do people need to feel safe enough to hand over tasks to an AI agent that's going to automatically run in the background? So that's my intro over. I'm going to talk about the patterns and aesthetics that designers seem to be converging on for AI products. And by that, I mean more than just the sparkles icon. I'll talk about how these patterns work to build trust. And then I'll talk about how we can work to deserve that trust. And finally, I'll wrap up with a challenge for everyone in this room as designers. So here's the sparkles. That's the AI aesthetic. We all know them, we love them. I actually do love them. I love that we all decide sparkles mean magic. AI is magic. Everyone's doing it. You know, the shareholders say, put AI in your product, and we're like, wow, sparkles. But as a design motif, I think it also does us a disservice because so much of building trust with AI products is about kind of making them not that scary black box, like just pulling back the lid a little bit and seeing what they're actually doing. So sparkles on their own just kind of feed into this idea that AI is never going to be understandable. It's just magic. Here's another thing that I think we need to break out of. AI is not just a chatbot UI. I think most people associate AI with typing in a box and getting an answer. But take Dot, for example. It's a mobile app that's designed to be empathetic and emotionally intelligent. Dot acts as your friend, companion, and confidant. These promises are so big and their UI is so simple. It's so minimal. It's just text in boxes. So what is it that actually makes up the user experience here? And what makes it different from WhatsApp or Zendesk or any other chatbot? So UX has always been about clarity and feedback and control. And those things, like it's traditional UX, but they're still important. We still do them every day. And AI introduces this new challenge on top of that, which is how do you design when you can't always predict what the AI will say or do or even get wrong? So with AI, you're not designing the answers, you're designing the conditions for the answers to emerge and the experience around it. So trust signals are a really huge and important part of designing for AI. And I want to share some examples of how different AI designers are using aesthetics to build that sense of trust. First up is organic animations. I don't know if organic is the right word here, but we talked about ChatGPT's voice, and I wanted to share kind of a slightly different pattern that also hits the same notes. This is Instagram's AI background generator, and they've got the sparkles there, and I want to point them out. So they call back to that magic that we talked about earlier, but they're also using them in a grid pattern that looks very much like a solar panel. And I think that's a really brilliant metaphor because solar panels are an actual physical invention that feel like magic, like the sun shines and we can power our homes. So I think that's really brilliant. And I think that the way that they've done this animation in particular just makes it feel really deliberate, and it gives a sense like the AI is thinking. It comes up with an answer for you. So voice and tone are also huge trust signals. I don't know if you guys can read that text in the back of the room, but like you can evaluate the tone of an agent against all other agents. You can say, like, is it casual? Is it formal? Is it robotic? Is it friendly? Does it give you the option to like switch between different modes? But I've picked Claude and Grok here as examples because they really could not be more different. Claude is already kind of formal. You can also tell it to be more formal, which this is an example of. Somebody's asked, what is Schrodinger's cat experiment? And Claude says, Schrodinger's cat is a famous thought experiment in quantum mechanics that illustrates the counterintuitive principles of quantum superposition. So we got formal. And I think that builds trust. Like you trust Claude when it talks like this to write an academic paper for you. And we've got Grok on the right. You can ask Grok to roast you, and it will. And it's telling somebody here named Vaughn, you're the kind of guy who thinks he's being eco-friendly by using pencils until they're nubs, but really, you're just too lazy to sharpen them properly. I actually don't think that makes sense, but like it's not a great insult, but there is trust there because it's coming out in Grok's voice. And when you talk to Grok, like you know what you're going to get. So like I'm just picturing if you were on Twitter and you were using Grok to insult people and it started talking like Claude, you'd be a little unsettled and you'd be disappointed. many AI products use these sci-fi aesthetics to create a sense of intelligence or control. So like these halo effects, these pulses, these glows. They're also borrowing and being inspired by media and culture in real life. Replica is an app from 2017. It's excuse me, it's an AI companion, which is straight out of films like Her and Ex Machina that came out a few years earlier. And then in the middle, we have the Humane AI pin. So God bless Star Trek. They have inspired actual tech products for 60 years. And it's very clear that the Humane AI pin was modeled on the Star Trek communicator badge. And then finally, Comet is a new agentic search browser that Perplexity is launching. And just like the Instagram example earlier, you can see like they've got the solar panel dot grid pattern in the background. So here's a cautionary note. Something looking smart and using all these aesthetics doesn't mean that it is smart. And sometimes the aesthetics can mask how brittle the intelligence really is. So RIP to the Humane AI pin. It made a big splash. There was a TED Talk. It was at Paris Fashion Week, and it could have been like really cool. But I think it's a great example of overpromising visuals and underwhelming behavior. So I think the concept was it's going to free people from their smartphones, but it couldn't set an alarm. It couldn't set a timer. It couldn't add calendar events. It overheated. I think The Verge reviewed it and they said, the problem with so many voice assistants is that they can't do much, and the AI pin can do even less, which, ouch. So as designers, like we need to make sure that we're backing up our aesthetics with functionality. So what can we do to actually deserve that trust? I'm going to talk about autonomous agents for the next few slides because, like, number one, that's what I work on every day. And two, I think they really illustrate a lot of these design challenges well. So they're designed to act independently. Unlike chatbots, which wait around for your next prompt, agents, they just go off into the world and do things. And this can mean booking appointments. It can mean sending emails or writing reports. They operate in loops, which is really cool, and they'll retry failed tasks. And the goal is kind of to set it and forget it. So there's lots of companies working on autonomous agents. There's a really, really small selection up here. Salesforce Agentforce and Microsoft Copilot Studio are both platforms for building agents. Devin is a software engineer agent, and Manus and ChatGPT's operator are kind of more general agents. So people are building agents every day, and they're testing them out in the wild. The stakes are higher for autonomous agents. So this promise of set it and forget it can backfire, especially when there's a problem. This article is from February. Somebody at the Washington Post asked ChatGPT operator for cheap eggs, and operator instead found the most expensive eggs they could. They paid $31, including tip and delivery fees, for 12 eggs. And they also actively broke out of safety guardrails that were programmed into it by OpenAI to stop it from making unauthorized purchases. So I want to be clear, like I'm picking on ChatGPT here because the headline, is kind of funny and attention grabbing, but this could be any platform. And the question is, what can we as designers do to mitigate these kind of risks? So one thing is to make sure we design for uncertainty. Someone built a small AI for GPs here, and I'm just including a screenshot here because I love the way that they phrase their disclaimer. Remember, I hallucinate, so check all outputs. And AI does hallucinate. That's just the nature of probabilistic systems, but users still need to know what they can trust it to do and what they can't, what they need to check in on. So your designs have to walk a fine line, show this uncertainty without causing panic or distrust of the system. So you might consider things like these messages. You could use confidence indicators and say like, oh, the AI is 70% sure in this answer, or even expose the AI's reasoning or chain of thought from behind the scenes. And then if you have an agent off in the real world doing things, I think the important thing is to make sure it's just not failing quietly in the background. Users should be able to watch it work and go back and check what it did afterwards. The screenshot here is from Copilot Studio. It's an earlier version. So you can create your agent there and then go check to see exactly what it's done. In this case, somebody's asked for the current weather and it said, okay, where are you? And they said Toronto, sorry. And they said, okay, it's 49 degrees Fahrenheit in Toronto. when an agent goes rogue or even just does something unexpected, users are really going to want to know why. So activity maps, memory views, decision transcripts, like they're not just logs, they let users investigate and troubleshoot. So this not only signals trust, it also builds trust, because when AI goes off script, users just want to be able to fix it. They want to understand it, fix it, and make sure that it doesn't happen again. So lastly, just our challenge as designers, my challenge to you. We are getting very good at making AI look smart through these glowing orbs and these flashy animations and tone of voice and things like that. But the real work is making sure that we deserve the trust that these signals create. So I think that's where our challenge really lies. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Just say thank you very much to Anna. That was brilliant. We've had 2 presentations so far, or speakers so far, and I don't know how we're all going to sleep tonight with all of the wonderful slides and information we're seeing. Yeah, buzzed. Hannah, just to give you some context on Hannah. Hannah's going to talk to us about mentorship and why mentorship is, why it matters, what's important, and about her own experience as well.
Hi, everyone. There's no AI in my presentation, except for it helping me formulate my thoughts. So just to introduce myself, my name is Hannah Vickers. I'm the Senior UX Designer at Teneo. I've been working in design for 10 years, 15 if you count when I was in college, but I don't know if that work counts. And I think for my entire career so far, I've focused on retaining a kind of multidisciplinary approach to my design practice. I'd consider myself a bit of a UX generalist, so I do everything end to end with varying degrees of success. Just kind of my career background, I obviously started on the VisCom program at IDT. If anyone is familiar with it, it's a very traditional graphic design, visual design program. So I'm coming into UX from that place, which sometimes is a curse and sometimes is a blessing. I care too much about what things look like and not so much about how they work, so I'm working on that. I started as a mentor in UX Tree in January of this year, so thank you to Val for inviting me to speak today, because I wouldn't be here unless I'd done that. And then before that, I was at Publicis, so I have an agency background. I understand your client concerns and frustrations. So who I am as a designer, I'm a sharp critical thinker, always striving to learn, teach, and grow. A mentor of mine said that about me 6 years ago, and I think he kind of nailed it, because it's stuck with me since, and there's a really kind of key part is the learn, teach, and grow. It's a core part of how I go about my daily life, but especially how I treat people in work and in the context of design and mentorship. So it's the day-to-day application of a growth mindset where we approach every problem as a learning opportunity for both myself and for anyone that I come across and that I get the pleasure of mentoring. So why is mentorship important in UX? I think it fills the gap between formal education and the real world. And I don't know about you guys, but me as a designer, I learn by doing. So solving real problems and facing real constraints. That's where mentorship really shines. It fills that gap and it gives you an opportunity to learn on your feet with the guidance of someone who's been there before. And I think it's one of the most powerful ways to grow. So I'm going to take you through some lessons I've learned in my career, either by the mentors that have mentored me or the opportunity I've had to teach people. So my career so far has been a bit of tapestry of experiences, kind of woven through lessons learned across many different industries, from events and exhibitions, tech, game design, advertising, and now UX in an agency context. So, and I think after 10 years, I've learned a few lessons along the way from mentors I've had and my experiences of mentoring designers under me. So I'm going to share them with you now. The first one is meet people where they're at, and it's possibly the most important one to me. So this is about tailoring your approach to the person in front of you. Not everyone learns or grows the same way. So mentees are just starting out and they need structure and confidence. Others need technical guidance and advanced challenge. And as a mentor, you need to tune into their current context, what they know, what they're unsure about, and what environment they're in. Empathy and adaptability are key here. And I think one of the main things I've learned throughout my career, and especially as a UX designer, is the power of empathy. We all use it in user-centered design. And I think having empathy encourages you to understand where a person is coming from. And that helps them guide them to where they want to go. So the second lesson I'm going to take you through sounds a little bit counterproductive, but don't always listen to me. This one might sound kind of the opposite, but I swear I can explain. So I've had the wonderful pleasure of mentoring Iris, who's sitting here tonight, over the last 2 years at Teneo. And this is the pinned comment in our team's chat. Never listen to me again. So I think I'd given her feedback on a piece of work and the client told her the exact opposite. So it really encapsulates a core idea I've learned as a mentor and tried to pass on as a principle. Don't take my word as gospel. I think good mentorship is not about expecting someone to follow you step by step. It encourages mentees to think critically and evaluate the advice, including mine, try things out, and sometimes completely disagree with me. The next lesson that I'm going to take you through is, I don't know, but let's find out together. So this simple phrase is such a powerful tool in mentorship and honestly in any kind of collaborative work. It flips the script on traditional notions of leadership and expertise, where you're expected to have all the answers. Instead, it opens the door to something far more valuable: shared curiosity. So saying I don't know doesn't make you less helpful. It invites collaboration and mutual discovery, which can feel so much more psychologically safe. And I think that's a key thing in any sort of mentor-mentee instance that I'm involved in, is psychological safety. It also fights imposter syndrome by showing that learning is continuous, no matter how experienced you are. And I think this attitude really fosters psychological safety and breaks down hierarchy. When you say, I don't know, but let's find out together, you're doing more than just being honest. You're modeling that it's safe to be unsure. And it turns mentorship into a partnership where both of you go through an inquiry, not just instruction. The fourth lesson, speaking of instruction, mentorship does not equal management. So what I've come to learn is I am not anyone's boss. You're not improving work, you're enabling growth. You're not the final say, you're a sounding board, a perspective, a thought partner. How I give feedback has changed so drastically over the years. It's less about what I would do, more about helping others think through their choices to figure out what they would do. This is how our team sees myself and Iris, which I absolutely love. When you approach mentorship as a partnership, not a power dynamic, you start to unlock something special. You shift from do it this way to what do you think? And I think good mentors are guides, not gatekeepers. Gatekeepers hoard knowledge, whereas guides, on the other hand, share generously. Which brings me very nicely to the final lesson I want to share with you this evening. This is me and my dad. And when I got to thinking about mentors in my life, I couldn't stand up in front of you and not mention him. My dad passed away last year, and in the weeks after his death, I questioned a lot of things, what I valued, my life, my perspective, and where I was putting my time. But as well as that, a really interesting thing happened. I got to know who my dad was in an entirely new and unexpected way. And it was through something one of his old colleagues said about him. He wore his vast knowledge lightly and he shared it generously. And it wasn't until I heard somebody else say this about him that I realized it's why I do it too. I got it from him. And the idea that knowledge is a privilege that I have and the value I could bring to others who hadn't similar opportunities to access it. So mentorship is a way to democratize knowledge, offering others a glimpse into the vast possibilities and learning I was fortunate enough to encounter in my life. And through mentorship, I've aimed to bridge that gap. And hopefully with these lessons, you can too. So for our final lesson this evening, thanks to my dad, wear your knowledge lightly and share it generously. Thank you.